7th, 2010 regular meeting.
I move we approve.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the September 7th, 2010 meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None being heard, motion carries. Item number 2, application Z10-6, Bill Shepard requesting a change in zoning from district classification from R single-family residential to C2 neighborhood shopping on a property legally described as lots 1 and 2, Block 7 in the Rolling Hills addition to the city of Salina, Saline County, Kansas. The subject property is located at the northwest corner of Marymount Road and Crawford Street. The applicant was redirected to amend his application to PC1 and come back to the Planning Commission with a proposed site development plan and building elevations no later than a September 21st, 2010 meeting. Dean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, this is an application that was filed in July. It was originally applied for as a change from R single-family residential to C2 neighborhood shopping. And the reason for the request for C2 was to leave open the possibility of businesses locating there that might be beyond something that was just business and professional offices that might be service related or very light retail related. And as a result of that, notice was sent out to the surrounding property owners. A hearing was held on August 3rd, 2010, and we had made a presentation of our report. There were comments from the applicant's representative. We had a number of neighboring property owners who commented, and we've attached their comments to your packets here. We had comments and questions from individual commissioners, and then a motion and a vote. And the motion directed the applicant to amend the application to planned C1. And the difference between a planned district and a straight commercial district is that a planned district requires submittal of a site development plan and also gives you the ability to delete potentially incompatible uses from a planned district. And that was to come back to you in no later than September 21 meeting. What occurred was the agenda deadline came and went. We did not have a drawing to review or any elevations to send out in our packet or to provide to neighboring property owners, but we understood that a plan was in the works, so we set this as the hearing date and notified neighboring property owners accordingly, except they did not have an opportunity, nor did staff, to review anything in advance of this meeting. So what we have is we did get the amended application filed. We did not have anything in your packet that we analyzed this site plan for compliance with C1 requirements, because we simply didn't have the time or opportunity to do that. So in our, it is your judgment call, but we think it would be appropriate to review the proposal, to hear the thinking of the applicant behind their proposal, to have you give feedback to the proposal, but we think it would be inappropriate to take any action at this meeting because neither staff or neighboring property owners have had a chance to review. We don't feel like we're in the position to answer any questions. So that would be your option. Your options would be to say that you don't have information in your packet to reach a decision, so you're not in a position to prove anything, or you can review the material and say this looks like it has some fit for this site, and then to us the appropriate thing would be to provide any feedback or comments you have and then choose a date, which could be even your next meeting, and say you will have a formal public hearing and vote at that meeting. That will allow neighbors to have reviewed the plan and offer any comments on it to you. Also allow us to write a report summarizing the plan for you. So this is an advertised, scheduled public hearing, and so I think what we will do, we got a lot of, you've got 7 renderings in there, correct, John? So I guess what will, this is the original information that we had at the last hearing. If you could go, this is what we received and is not in your packet, nor have any neighbors seen it. But this is the conceptual site plan submitted, and we will, if you can't see all the details, this is an 84 by 50 foot building here. Be approximately 4,200 square feet. And this would, for orientation, be the fire station up here, Briarcliff, Marymount here. They're proposing a driveway here and no outlet over here onto Briarcliff, a single building there with all the parking to the north and lawn area preserved here. And I guess we just go to the renderings, John. This would be a view if you were at the fire station or in the parking lot looking at it from the north as we understand it. This would be if you were across the street on Marymount over by the Security Savings Bank and the Wilbur development there looking to the southwest. This is more of an elevated view, but again, this is the yard separation with the fire station to the north. This would be Briarcliff here. This would be Crawford here, and you can't see Marymount in the picture, but just for orientation, this would be looking towards the southwest, with this being the signalized intersection, the driveway out. And I think, what, we have one more, John? Okay, this would be looking from the corner, looking to the northwest. And this would be if you were driving or walking on Briarcliff and looking at this from the west and looking back towards Marymount and the Marymount-Crawford intersection. So if you had a house on the west side of Briarcliff looking back, this is, as proposed, what the view would be. And so I think with that, John, if you could go back to the overall site plan. Mr. Stack has not even seen this, so he can't comment to you about driveway locations or anything like that. That's why we would like an opportunity to review and be able to write a report for you. But this does a very good job of at least giving you the concept for how everything would fit on the site. So we'd be open to any technical questions.
Bill did call me yesterday, and that's what we talked about as a good location for the driveway. Far enough from the intersection as he can get and not on the residential street off of Marymount. So it looks like it's the best of what he can do there, and it looked great to us.
So we would hear any technical questions you might have, and then let the applicants present what thought went into their concept, and then you can, if Mr. Hutchison has any comments, he can have an opportunity for those, and then would take direction from you from there.
I agree. It seems inappropriate to take any action at this stage without giving staff and the community members time to see the plan and be able to comment, and us as well. I would like to hear from the applicant and any questions that the board might have of you.
I'm Bill Shepard. I can answer any questions you have.
Address, Bill?
430 Greystone.
Is the plan that this building house one office then, or will there be several, or?
There could be two. I mean, there's not a ton of room to have more than that, but I could see one or two offices in the facility, yes.
Do you have anything in mind?
Working on some stuff. I'm not at liberty to say at this point, so.
Yeah, it looks, from a presentation standpoint, it looks like it would fit in well with the neighborhood. I've made it a point to drive by that quite a few times over the last couple of weeks, and kind of envisioning what something would look like there, and that's very nice. And I like the screenings on the Briarcliff side.
Yeah. Our thought is it's a residentially zoned lot. The problem with residential in that corner, it just doesn't fit. I mean, I'd hate to see a couple houses put in there with privacy fences backing up to Marymount and Crawford and kind of ugly that corner up. There's some intersections in town that aren't as major as you can go by, and they have privacy fencing running the property line and weeds growing up through them, and I just don't think it's a good fit for that corner. One of the problems that some of the neighboring people addressed or were concerned about was entrance, and I think we've kind of covered that, just limiting a single entrance on and off of Marymount. And obviously we visited with city staff about it, and they seem to think that that's a good plan. So.
You're not planning any sheds on that property?
No, not on the corner at least.
I particularly like the kind of the residential appearance with the hip roof,
Yes.
and then the screening. You've really addressed that very attractively, I think, as far as screening away from the neighborhood, so it doesn't give the appearance of a business on the residential side. I think it's laid out nicely and has some landscaping potential there. Dean, I do have a question of you with PC1 though. While this is a rendering, and all renderings are subject to some tweaking, of course, by it being PC1, if that's eventually what we agree to, then that can be controlled. It can be limited to what?
Right. I mean, the laundry list of what you can do in C1, which we put in your packet, it's not real lengthy, but if you wanted to exclude medical and dental clinics, or you wanted to exclude mortuaries and funeral homes and limit it to the business and professional offices, you could certainly do that.
Well, it certainly would appear to complement the fire station as well in that area. It has sort of that appearance of more residential appearance than maybe business. So I think it has some visual attractiveness to it.
Just for clarification, the sign would be on the corner of Marymount and Crawford there, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And what would be the size limitation for that?
In a C1, the maximum size for, again, the individual sign would be 32 square feet for the ground sign. Roughly 4 by 8 or 5 by 6 or something
32.
along that line.
Same as a resident.
I noticed on the plan you don't have any building, now they could have a building sign too, is that correct?
That's correct.
You don't have any building signs on the Crawford Street side, is that by design, or is that?
That's our intention, is to not have that. That's correct, yeah.
Would you be leasing the space or selling it, or?
Both. Either.
Okay.
I'm not sure at this point.
Okay.
Was that big tree that you took out and getting in the way?
Yes. Yeah, 65 years old, to be exact.
John, could you go to that rendering that shows the fence on the north? And maybe you could help us a little bit. Bill, how does there are some trees that are planted along the south side of the fire station site. I think you have that in your earlier, it's slide 2, John, in the original application. But how does these trees over here on the left, they don't seem to show up on those renderings. I assume they would be somewhere between the fence and the fire station building.
Our intention is to save what we can there. Those trees are actually on our property. That depends on, our intention is to leave them if we can.
Okay. But that, as it stands, that fence that is shown on that plan would be sitting on the property line, roughly.
Within the property, yes.
So it would be south of the property line then, is that what you're saying?
That's correct, yes.
And the trees would be on the,
They're pretty much, they're either on our property or on the property line itself.
okay, so the trees would be.
I'd like to leave them. I think they need to
We'd
be
like
trimmed
for you
up.
to leave them.
Huh? Well, I like them. I think they add to the attractiveness of the property.
And it's a natural screen. It
It
helps
is.
people farther up Briarcliff, and
Yeah.
and that's an
Yep.
issue.
Yeah, I believe the fire department or the city's forestry department planted those trees, but they may not have done a good job of measuring. So.
Any further questions of the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess at this point, I'd like to know if, and I apologize for not knowing your name, Mr. Hutchison. Do you have any questions in regards to this plan? Okay.
I'm Tom Hutchison. I live at 680 Briarcliff Road. Okay. I'm a resident across the street from it. When I got the letter from Dean about the meeting and stuff, you don't see a lot of neighbors here because in the letter that I received on the agenda, the letter that you have, and the last sentence there, it was staff's understanding the local architect was retained to prepare a site layout for a possible office building on this lot. However, as of the agenda deadline for the September 21st meeting, staff had not received a site development plan to review and prepare a report on. Okay? So I think, I feel kind of like the gun's loaded against us a little bit. And I'm not being negative on it or anything like that. I don't mean any negativity. I think for consideration, if you didn't make the deadline, it's kind of like coming to school and having a lesson and you don't have it prepared and you give them an extra day without any repercussions. I think that you know, if you didn't meet the deadline, you didn't meet the deadline, you ought to refile on it. I know circumstances are given, but I don't have anybody here when you show that stuff to react to see your reaction, how you react, to see what their reaction is to it, okay, or to hear what his presentation was. And I don't think that's fair, okay? At the one meeting, we were asked, you know, I said that keep residential and commercial. And I was asked if, you know, if I had the druthers between C2 and C1, what would I prefer? And that's a no-brainer. That's C1 planned, okay? But that didn't mean that I stepped away from what I had on originally on residential, and I'm still holding to the residential. It's a nice-looking building. I think you're gonna have to have more trees on the east side of that to block, okay? And again, it's nothing against, Bill, I have nothing against you. It's nothing, it's just the way it is. I think the building is an attractive building. I cannot speak for the other neighbors. Do I like C1 plan? No. It's residential. And people say, well, you know, you can't put any housing on it or anything like that. I don't know how to say this, but there's housing on the east side of Briarcliff anyway that has the backsides to Marymount, and they have trees there that act as a buffer for their yards and what have you. I understand there's 2 lots there, you know, that could be developed. Is this, if you said we're not going to consider R1 and you made that determination at this point, I understand that and I respect that, and I don't think anything less of you one way or the other, because I don't have any animosity toward anybody, okay? This is not a bad-looking concept, okay? I just wish that before you acted on it, before it was showing up there, that the neighbors could have had been here to have seen it and reacted to it, because I don't think it's a fair playing field. You know what I mean?
There's not going to be any action.
Oh, I know, but I'm just talking about just putting it up there initially, to me, is not the same. The neighbors aren't here to look at it. I mean, if I'd have known that, you know, and Dean said that could happen, and some of my neighbors called me and asked me if they needed to be here. And, you know, they're taking time out for work and stuff, and based upon the letter and then talking with Dean and nothing, Dean's a fine gentleman, and does a tremendous job. I said no, you know. Maybe I should have said yes, you know what I mean? So it sounds like I'm kind of going wham, and I don't mean to be. I want a fair, level playing field. That's all I'm asking. And I think that's okay. You know, if you want to continue this on until October, that's fine. But I think, you know, if he's got a deadline to meet and he's supposed to have things turned in at a certain point in time and he doesn't meet those deadlines, then, you know, cut it and hold him to what he's supposed to be doing. If he's supposed to have it 10 days before it's supposed to be due so you can have it in your packet to look at it, then hold him to it. Don't let it go on past and stuff, because you'll continue to be doing that. Questions of me?
Thank you, Mr. Hudson. Anyone else in the audience, since this is a public hearing, anyone else care to comment on this? Okay. Mr. Montoya?
Mike Montoya, 256 South Santa Fe. Our understanding was that we were to have the information to you by the 21st. We had to get that done and completed. It was done yesterday, and turn that in. And so we weren't, in all due respect, trying to take advantage of anything or not follow the rules. I certainly think it's fair to the applicant to set this over until the next hearing, give everybody a chance to look at it. In fact, Mike McMahon's a good friend of mine right next door to me. I went over and talked to him about 2:30, 3 o'clock, and told him that, you know, we were talking about this, and he said, well, you're not having your hearing, you didn't turn anything in. I said, yeah, we are. Make sure you let Kathy know and let the other neighbors know, because I want to make certain that they have an opportunity to come and review everything and have that, so they can make comments and good comments to look at everything that you have. And so our goal was to make sure everybody knew that this was going forward, and when he told me that, I was a little bit surprised, and I certainly understand that they need to have a chance to review all that and encourage them to do that. And so we have no objection to setting that over.
Thank you. Go ahead.
With due respect to him, I do believe there was a letter sent stating that when they needed the packet in front of them to be by Mr. Andrews' office, that to be considered to be on the agenda to be able to be put out to you. You know, having him talk with the McMahons and stuff, and they're good people, don't get me wrong, they're neighbors, they're friends, and then have it disseminated to us, and not the way you do things professionally. And I do believe if you ask Mr. Andrews that he did send a letter out, did not get a response to that letter of when the deadline was and needed to be turned in for the staff to consider what they needed to act on. Deadline of the 20th, so if the 21st came and it wasn't there, then at that point it could either be brought to you if they presented something, and you could extend it on into October, or they would have to have do a new application.
Well, we're not going to drop this application because
no, I
of
understand
the
that,
deadline.
But what I'm saying is when he said
you,
he did, when he
I'm
got
talking,
that,
please.
Go ahead, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be rude, and I apologize.
Everyone will get a chance to see the information at the same time. And I would encourage Mr. Montoya. We had a similar situation over by the airport. I don't remember the exact nature of the property, but the applicant actively engaged the neighbors, and they came to a nice resolution on the project, and it was, frankly, it saved a lot of time in this venue here after we did that, or after they did that. So anyway, I would encourage you to proactively engage the neighbors and try to get some buy-in on this before it comes to the next meeting.
I offered that immediately after our last meeting.
Okay.
To who?
Mr. McMahon.
Okay, I didn't know anything about it. I hadn't heard anything. And my point is, you know, and nothing against you, but my understanding that what I was told that they had gotten, were sent a letter of a deadline that they had to have it for the staff to consider it for in order to get it out to you. So when he says that, then what he said, then I'm having conflict with that. And that's all. I'm not trying to be abrasive or anything else.
Okay. Thank you.
Point of clarification, well, just for my sake, will the hearing be continued if we don't take action, which is a given, we're not going to, then we do bring this back for action, will there be a hearing continuance or not?
Yes, this
Okay.
was a continuation from your August 3rd meeting. This is basically a continued public hearing from that, and you have the discretion to decide what is the appropriate date and time to continue this, and it's important that that date and time is determined, so then we can, one, get the notice out, and two, gather all these things here that you have and get them mailed out to the neighboring property owners, so everybody has the same information and the same period of time to review it and ask questions about it.
What's a reasonable time for staff to need to evaluate this?
Well, your next scheduled public meetings, and what Mr. Hutchison is referring to is in the letter I sent summarizing the August 3rd, we asked to get the plans 10 days in advance of, because this could have come back, you had a meeting the 17th, you had a meeting September 7th, and you had this meeting. This could have come to you at any one of those meetings. We didn't know when that was going to occur. So we asked to get the plans 10 days in advance of whatever hearing was requested so we could write a report, put the packet together, and also get notice out to the neighboring property owners. So if you were treating this like we were starting the clock fresh, then your October 19th meeting would be the appropriate period of time to have the notice out, get 20 days notice and 20 days opportunity to comment. Because if somebody was filing an application this past week, the hearing date for that application would be the 19th of October.
And we need a motion for that, is that correct?
If you would
continue that.
want to continue this hearing and schedule October 19th as a date for taking some action on this application, that would be an appropriate motion to continue this hearing to October 19th.
I didn't.
So moved.
In a second? Been moved and seconded to continue this item, this public hearing, application Z10-6 till October 19th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None being heard, motion carries.
I would suggest to Mr. Montoya and Mr. Shepherd that you call Mr. Hutchinson and set up a time when the neighbors come together and look at the whole plan. They may give you some ideas that you can do something about before the 19th that will, otherwise we may have to bounce it back to you because they're going to be here on the 19th.
I would offer to Tom, if he would give me a list of names and addresses, I'd hand deliver everything that's shown up here.
Yeah, we're still going to do the formal mailing,
Right.
and we will
Right. I'm
will
just saying
take
the time when you
the
get together.
items you see here and get those into each of the homeowners' hands.
Yeah, just a suggestion.
Yeah. And like we had talked about the other place over by the airport, I believe is a storage facility.
Yeah, it was on Foxborough.
Yeah.
Hasn't had a good ending either, but that's all right.
But that, you are correct that they had a meeting between hearings where they had a meeting with the neighborhood and
Yeah.
took some of those things into account when they presented their final plan to you.
Yeah, and they got a lot of that stuff hashed out there, and it kept it out of here, which I think probably was a better format being there, so.
I think conceptually,
Encourage you to do
were
that.
here when they've got the renderings done from all views. They've got it pretty well put together.
Okay, item number 3, application PDD 03-3B, filed by Rex Veneer, requesting approval of an amended final development plan for Lot 1, Block 5 of the River Run PDD to allow it to be converted from townhome to single-family home development. Subject property is located on the east side of Overlook Drive, south of River Run Parkway. This was removed from the June 1st, 2010 agenda at the request of the applicant. Dean?
All that access was.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think from a land use standpoint, this is controversial or questionable at all when anytime you're requesting basically a downzoning to go from a multifamily format to a single-family format. There were some questions that we received early on from property owners that we couldn't address. And again, as you discussed here, we suggested that maybe Mr. Veneer visit with some of the people who had purchased homes or lots to better explain what the change was. Our primary comment is that from a compatibility or land use standpoint, this is not very hard, but from a technical and engineering standpoint, it's a challenge to retrofit an area that was laid out for cluster townhomes and modify that to make it workable. That you've got from an engineering standpoint, the layouts were all done based on the cluster of townhome layout, so you have existing utilities to work around, and then you've got various covenant documents and homeowners association documents associated with townhomes that then have to be modified. And then the final complication is that one of the townhomes actually got built, so you have to still work around and provide for its continued existence. So just by way of background, the River Run addition dates back to 2003. That was the time the Planning Commission initially looked at it. And this is a layout of the full area. And the what we had in the initial preliminary plat was 83 residential lots for single-family homes and one large lot and block. And we had a full 94 acres that we were dealing with. And there was a condition that in the townhome area that a final plan for that needed to come back to the Planning Commission. And that was done later in 2003. And John has that plan up here on the screen. And just by way of orientation, this is River Run Parkway that comes in off of Marymount. The Elks Club is over here. This is Overlook. And the idea was that you would have this basically we were treating it as a driveway. You'd have individual driveways here, and then an internal driveway that provided access. So that was not treated as a private street per se, but as a driveway. So we started out, we've got one large lot, which is Lot 1, Block 5. It had 10, John, if you could go back to that, please. Got 10 buildings on it. There's 3 units in each of those buildings. And the underlying zoning is R2 for townhomes. And so there were elevation drawings that were submitted as part of that showed 2-story buildings with woodlap siding and pitched roofs. And the way that this is set up is that the townhome units would be owned by individual buyers, and then all the exterior yard areas, that would be common area. And so the lawns, yard areas, the driveways, the service drive, those would be owned and maintained by a homeowners association. So you approved that in 2003 with a provision that this diameter up here be expanded to a total of 90 feet for a turnaround there, that articles of incorporation, bylaws, and covenants be recorded with the plat, that a final landscape plan and plans for monument sign and markers be approved before the first building permit. There was an addressing scheme that was approved, and the development to date is, I believe, this unit right here, which was E1, E2, and E3. There was a permit issued for that in 2006, and because this is a driveway, all of these units here were addressed off of Overlook Drive. So those were the basic parameters. And so one of the things that the Register of Deeds mentioned was not maybe clearly articulated by us, but the reason for the two actions here, one relating to the development plan and one separate, the plat, is that the applicant, as we noted there, is been very disappointed in response to the townhome concept, so he wants to amend the PDD to abandon the townhome concept and convert this back to a single-family housing area. But this particular drawing right here is recorded in the Register of Deeds office, and so if you buy a townhome unit right here, you're buying in reference to this recorded drawing. So in order, the Register of Deeds has this on file. In order to make this go away, there has to be a substitute plan approved by you and then filed by the Register of Deeds. And John, you can go to the next one. Well, the next one after that.
There may be one more after that.
Okay, yeah, it would be the, so basically the substitute plan is going to still have to show this townhome there and reference those units. And then these are building tracks within that PDD area, and then there's some common area left in there. But the concept is that you have single family, single family, single family, single family, single family, so 8 development sites with overlook, and then these sites internal, and this would have to be a named private street. And so some of the questions we had initially was, in the remainder of the subdivision, there were 3 types of lots. There were villa lots, manor lots, and estate lots. Each of them had customized lot size and setbacks, and it wasn't clear to staff, nor could we tell owners across the street what was proposed here in the way of those housing types. And then it appeared to us that this was going to be a private street and try to make use of some of the existing driveway there. And then it was not clear to us whether the covenants that were in place applied just to the townhome area or subdivision wide in terms of any amendments to those. And then we pointed out that as it stands now, these 4, particularly these 3, are not buildable as we have. So this particular item, item 3, deals with amending the PDD, amending the land use from R2 townhome zoning. Should that be repealed and replaced with some form of single-family zoning? And if so, should the lots be villa lots, manor lots, or estates lots? And so I think that's, on this particular question, that's what we'd want to hear from the applicant, is what the vision would be for if all of these would be turned into manor lots, or if there's any customized zoning or setback requirements we would need to consider for this alternate plan. So with that, this is focused on the land use, single family versus townhomes. I'd be open to any questions about that aspect. But we have an ordinance that zoned this for 10 townhomes, 3 townhomes per building, and we'd have to undo that and make this single family. And so we would hear from the applicant. You have some of the responses to our staff report questions attached to the report, but I think the applicant would be in the best position to state the concept for these 14 proposed lots. But before that, I'd be open to any questions you have.
Any questions, staff?
Did you say the bottom 3 lots weren't buildable?
Well, today they would not be buildable because the pavement ends
Stops. Oh, okay.
here.
Okay.
And the utilities, John, if you could go back to that first plan. The townhome plan, it might be 2. This I don't think this would have been buildable either, but basically the paving stops right in here, so does the water line. And so there would have to be some additional utilities extended to make those, and paving extended to make those fully buildable. Within the townhome area itself, most of the utilities are already there. It's just that they were laid out based on the townhome layout, so it has to be retrofitted to make this work. But again, I'd be open to any questions you have about the PDD concept.
Commissioner Kennedy.
I have two questions. One is concerning the road, and not that I'm suggesting this, but just a question. Is there any way that that road can become a city road as opposed to a private drive?
I had the same question.
And
And I don't understand the concept of a named private drive. Then they are responsible for the maintenance on and upkeep on that then, or?
Well, anytime, and I mean, we have a long list of named private streets throughout the community. Any time that you are, and we'll have to go back to 5, John. Okay, this townhome, this lot, this lot, this lot, this lot, this lot, or this is a common area, but these would all be accessed on and have frontage off of that, which would become a private street. And in order for 911 and EMS to find it, that would need to be designated with a name. Now, the standards in 2003, the Planning Commission and City Commission spent a lot of time looking at private streets, and eventually, when you were all done with it, the specifications for paving and width and things of that nature are almost equivalent. So you would have to have a reason for wanting to do that. Now, the issue here is that this configuration here does not come close to meeting either the private street or public street standards as far as paving width, right-of-way width, curve radiuses, diameters, anything.
Sidewalk?
So
Yeah, no sidewalks.
none of those things. So I have determined that after we wrote our report that when I was looking at the city code, and John, you have the slide for private streets.
I thought he said they require them to be similar to.
One moment.
They're not. I don't get it. I'm lost now.
Okay. So these are the criteria for when you can have a private street. So this, if it was a private street, it will have direct access onto Overlook Drive. It's necessary to provide access. It does not connect to anything outside the development, so it's strictly internal. It's designed not to encourage, but to discourage through traffic. And you have to judge that it will provide adequate access, save movement of traffic, proper drainage, and serve as an adequate alternative to a public street. And then we have a requirement that notes on there so that people who buy in a subdivision that has a private street understand what that responsibility is. We make sure that there is a bona fide homeowners association. They're the authority that maintains and exercises control over the street, and we make sure that the homeowners association has power to compel contributions to maintain that. Here are the standards: a minimum right-of-way width of 45 feet and a paving width of 25 feet. We don't quite have that here. And then we also have requirements for the cul-de-sac at the end. Except for those things, the public streets are supposed to, or the private streets are supposed to conform with the public street standards. They are supposed to be named, And if you drive down Markley Road, you'll see at the intersection of Florida Soul Drive and Markley Road a white sign and a green sign. And the green sign tells you that's a public street. The white sign tells you that's a private street. So Florida Soul Drive is a private street. East Bank Drive off of Marymount Road is a private street. Barlow Court is a private street. All the streets in Highland Meadows Hamlets are private streets. Horizon Drive and Presbyterian Manor is a private street. And so the way those are denoted are white street signs that denote those as private. They are not compelled to make this a private street, but when we looked at it and we were trying to see how this could be made to fit, it comes closer to conforming with the private street standards. And so some of those have been modified, and so the requirement is that all private streets shall conform to design standards for public streets established by the city engineer. That includes curb and gutter. So you can't build private streets without curb and gutter anymore, and the plans have to be reviewed and approved by Mr. Stack prior to construction. You can grant variances to some of those requirements if you don't think there'll be a harm to public safety, if there are unique conditions with the property, if there are physical conditions that would make it a hardship to comply with the public street standards, and the peculiar conditions were not the result, or were not created by an act of the property owner. You can restrict on-street parking, you can require sidewalks, and all lots and tracts that have access from that named private street are supposed to have their address assigned off of that street. That's probably a good question, and that's probably a good discussion point. The amendments in 2003 were designed to not necessarily discourage private streets, but to nudge them as close as possible to public streets as we could. And the best example that I have, and Mr. Malinowski was involved in that, so he can speak to it personally. If you go out to Highland Meadows Hamlet, you will see the first phase, the north phase, has a rural type section with roadside ditches and no curb and gutter on the streets. If you go to the south end, the second phase was done after these amendments to the private street standards, and those have equivalent paving depth and curb and gutter as a public street, but they are private streets. So the primary reason for having private streets is there is a little more flexibility. Somebody could come to you and make a case for not having curb and gutter, or for an adjustment to paving design or width that's not necessarily there with a public street. But I guess this can't be done without you granting some waivers as to right-of-way width, paving width, curve radiuses, and cul-de-sac diameters, because it is a retrofit. Whether you would prefer to do that and require it to be a public street as opposed to a private, the reason we were looking at it as a private street is that they seem to be trying to take advantage of the existing pavement that was already there for the townhome driveways, and we know that doesn't meet city street standards, most likely from a paving standpoint. So that it is not, if you don't feel comfortable making that be a private, it would be the only private street in this development. It is possible to make it a public street, but then it was going to be incumbent on Mr. Stack to make sure that what they build there complies with all the other streets in the subdivision.
Would then the cost for that public street be special assessments on the property owners?
Yes. I mean, it could be. It wouldn't have to be.
Well, and I'm not sure, part of the reason...
That's the difference. You can't do that for a private street,
Right.
but you could for a public.
And I might share that part of the reason for my question is a little of the experience I've had with some private streets. Nobody's ever truly fond of school buses on private streets. They're heavy and they're trucks and they come twice a day, 180 days a year. And so we have to sometimes get permission to use private streets, and that is always an ongoing issue. I can see that area could be potentially a busing area, and if it develops out, we would hope there'd be a lot of kids come from there.
Yeah.
We'd want to send buses in there possibly. So that was the reason
The
for the question.
city has the same issue with trash trucks
Right.
if it's a private
Right.
street because
So-
of the extra weight and length and those things. So we looked at it, looked at the dimensions, looked at trying to incorporate the existing paving that was there, and we interpreted it as trying to convert that to a private street, but we're not required to make it a private street. It just seemed to fit that
Yeah.
more closely. But if you say you'd prefer it to be a public street, they're going to have to make the paving meet our specifications, but there's going to have to be waivers, and those are really highlighted more in the plat section, but we wanted to, from the zoning and the plan development section, give that to you as a concept. But it is not written in stone that this has to be a private street. So we'd want to hear.
You also mentioned the diameter, and then maybe this is a question for Mr. Stack. The diameter of the cul-de-sac up there, is that smaller than what even a private street would allow?
The
Cul-de-sac's okay, isn't it, Dean?
Yeah, what about fire trucks
do you
and
want to give him the
Right.
all of that getting in there? And
That is
back
one
out?
of, that's the concern.
got
I
insurance.
mean, the cul-de-sac distance or radius is okay, isn't it, Dean?
I believe yes, it's just the throat of the road itself, not the area available there at the
Yeah.
end.
Okay, so well, just as a list of things that make it not meet a standard private street, then the paving thickness, I'm sorry, for a public street, the paving thickness, and then what was the other?
Well, we'll let
Curve.
Mr. Malinowski speak to that. I don't think that the driveway that was built there to serve the townhomes would meet our specification for a public street.
And the
But,
curve radiuses aren't
yeah, the
quite-
curve radiuses, we need 150-foot minimum radius on a street curve, and we don't have it. The right-of-way width doesn't meet our
Thanks.
current standards. The paving width doesn't meet the standards for either public or private streets. And so what you have is you've got a thin corridor in here because when you build a driveway, driveways don't have right-of-way. Driveways just have the body of the roadway in it, and driveways don't have to be 25 feet wide or 29 feet wide. So they were trying to take advantage of the existing roadway that was there, and also if you start widening out right-of-ways to 50 or 60 feet, then you start eating into the places where you can actually build something. So it would, if you took this and tried to retrofit this into a standard design, you would really be eating into those lots. So their idea is to have narrower right-of-way, but to have utility easements behind the right-of-way for the existing utilities that are there.
On lots 13, 14, 15, where do the driveways come off then?
John, you may have to blow that up because I can't read any of the numbers.
Be off Overlook.
Okay. Well, I couldn't tell if there were any cuts there
There's
or
already a pre-existing curb cut in there.
on 14.
Yeah, right, yeah, well, you can see it right there, yep, on 14.
Okay, what about 15?
There's nothing there. There's not a curb cut in there.
But it would be like that there as
There would
well.
be, though, yeah.
So,
Yeah, these lots here would all be oriented to have access and face Overlook. This lot, this lot, this lot, this lot, this lot would be internal and have access off of that road.
Exit off of Overlook. How do you get out of Overlook on the south?
and Overlook is a city street.
Yes, Overlook, all all the streets in River Run presently today are public streets.
And so, I'm just trying to think through, if this were a usual subdivision, those driveways, I mean, what kind of street would we classify Overlook?
We considered a local residential street.
And there would be no reason not to have driveways coming off of that?
No.
Okay. And there is no place in the subdivision where there are sidewalks, is that correct?
No, there are sidewalks. When this was approved as a subdivision, again, because of the terrain and the tightness, you approved a 50-foot right-of-way and a 29-foot street, and you approved requiring sidewalks on only one side of the public streets. So there are public sidewalks in River Run, but they're required on only one side instead of both sides. And again, the number one challenge with River Run when it was done was the fact that because of terrain, all the utilities wanted to be in front. So sewer's in front, gas is in front, water's in front, and electricity is in front. And there just simply wasn't room to have all those utilities and have sidewalks on both sides as well.
So obviously the sidewalks are on the, is that the west side of Overlook then?
No, they're on the east side. There's a sidewalk that goes all
Okay.
the way.
Do you have any sort of aerial photo we can look at, John?
It's fairly early 2005.
Okay.
So then you're asking that no sidewalks be, that you have no sidewalks internally in this, this
On
part?
the new private, that'd be correct.
And were there ever any sidewalks when it was going to be it was going to be condoized or townhomes?
Our assumption would have been that the sidewalk on the east side of Overlook Drive would continue. But
To
there was never a plan for internal sidewalks in the townhome area.
Oh, okay.
The other thing about River Run is that there's also a system of walking trails in the area that are off-street that are also available that you don't have in every subdivision. So that was part of the reasoning for the Planning Commission only requiring sidewalks on one side of the public street. One was crowding, the other was the fact that there was an internal walking trail system as well.
Mm-hmm. And just one last question. So, as the cul-de-sac is now, Dan, that is plenty of radius for fire trucks to get in, turn around, and get back out again?
It currently meets our
Okay.
our city standard now.
Okay.
And I guess I would think that was put into place because it turned a fire truck around.
Okay.
Yeah, even when it was a driveway for townhome
Right.
purposes, we wanted it to be wide enough. We knew that fire trucks would be going in there, and they had to be able to get back out as
Yep.
well as trash trucks.
That's correct.
And so John, if you could go back to the aerial photo, you can see that a lot of these turnarounds have islands in them. This isn't actually a roundabout, but this has an island, this has an island. And this was a one where the fire department actually went out and tested the turning radiuses of all of its vehicles and helped establish our dimensions based on that. As long as this island's small enough, the outer areas, you're fine with turning it around. So that was looked at over here, and that was determined to be adequate for fire apparatus to turn around. It's more, and again, we need to hear from the applicant and his engineer if there's no plan to try to utilize the existing paving, and it's simply going to be rebuilt to some uniform paving standard, then other than the parts about the right-of-way and paving width and the curve radiuses, as long as the paving thickness is there, it shouldn't matter between a public and private street.
Any further questions of staff? Would the applicant care to address the commission, please?
I'm Sam Malinowski, Cook Flat and Strobel Engineers, 210 Southwind Place, Manhattan, Kansas. Yeah, we've been working with Dean pretty much all summer on this. As far as all your concerns, the main reason for the right-of-way width is, I mean, you've got to have utility easements in there. Being this is a retrofit where we're taking townhomes out and putting in single-family, all the utilities are in place, or we've got easements for the utilities. We're going to have some utilities off the back. Water and sewer is all in place for everything, with the exception of one, lots 1 through 3, which, if we extend Overlook, then they'll take care of itself. Pavement width, we've actually got over half the pavement is already in, and we are going to try to reuse it, and it's concrete pavement, so it's beefier than just plain old asphalt, so it's able to stand up. And we're going to reuse all of it and just extend, basically put the cul-de-sac right where it was going to be before and just make it single family. And other than that, I mean, it's one of those deals that we're just trying to take advantage of the change in the economy, and like Dean said, the townhomes weren't selling. We're going to try to see if we can't make single family work in there. I got Rex Veneers here too, and he can comment on the homeowner association and what with the existing townhomes and all that. But
do you have an opinion on how that existing concrete paving compares to what a city concrete specification is for a street?
I think it's heavy duty. I mean, I'd have to go back and look actually what it was, but I think it's probably 8-inch concrete pavement.
So, yeah, again, the only aspect of that for making it a public street is that Mr. Stack and his staff would have to look at the existing paving and determine that we would want to accept that as a public street for maintenance based on what's there. So it's not that we're trying to force anybody to have a private street, because that can be extra work to maintain, but they would, if they want it to be a public street, they just have to make sure that the entire extent of paving met our specifications and that we would want to accept it for city maintenance.
Well, I don't have any problem with it not being a public street. I think it should at least breach our standards of private streets.
Yeah, I just, because of the corridor that you have to work with there, and the it's not it's probably not as critical on a private street, because generally private streets themselves don't have what you would consider right-of-way, other than the fact that the right-of-way is owned by the homeowners association. But what Mr. Malinowski's pointing out, that while the right-of-way might be narrower, there's still going to be public easements behind that. The difference is who owns it and where you set the property line. So under this scenario, this person's property line starts here for setback purposes and maintenance and other things. If you widen that right-of-way out, that pushes that back. But I think that given the space they have to work with, it would be difficult to come up with 45, or for a public street, 50 feet of dedicated right-of-way through there based on the space that's available.
I think to address your concern, I mean, where we're not meeting the street criteria is curb and gutter and the extra foot of pavement,
Right.
where we got concrete pavement in place. To add a foot of pavement is going to be, it's not going to, it won't stay put. I mean, it'll just break off at some point. You can't make that work very well. And the curb and gutter, same deal. It's just going to start, encroaching out, and it won't. Like I said, we've got 24 foot of, you can see right there where the pavement is hatched.
Sure.
That's how much pavement's actually in place right now.
So the next person who comes up, developer, and wants a private drive without curb and gutter, then we tell them,
Well, this is such a unique situation. I mean, it's basically, we're
They're all unique.
retrofitting
That's the problem.
infill. I mean, and it's one of those things, it's like we said, there's no chance of this street ever punching through. I mean, the through traffic's not going to happen. It's pretty much exactly like it was with the townhomes, just less density. So we're actually, we're actually improving the situation because we're not having as much traffic on it.
That's the only saving grace, is it's just like that. And there'll be fewer cars and people. And
again, and going back and reading the notes, there were some developers at the time, they wanted to have what the Planning Commission did was they voted to recommend that private street standards be equivalent to city public street standards, but that a hardship or safety valve provision be added to allow waivers to the curb design, paving thickness in certain situations where conditions warrant it. The burden would be on the applicant to demonstrate that compliance with public street standards is unfeasible or impractical.
okay.
So what Mr. Malinowski's trying to present and what the situation we're seeing is that it seems to us that compliance with public street standards is not really feasible or practical here. And again, this is a retrofit, so it's not, from our perspective, if somebody was coming in with a field that was vacant and they said they want to have 35 feet of right-of-way and narrower streets and there's nothing you can point to that say we have this physical constraint. But here, we're dealing with a situation where we're dealing with a retrofit, and the other thing that's different here is that all the utilities, the water and sewer and everything's already installed, and they're having to design around those corridors, the gas lines, the sewer lines, the water lines, everything in here as far as the design is designed around things that are already in the ground. And that's the other distinction.
I have a question maybe for Mr. Stack and Mr. Malinowski. Dean had mentioned the radius of the little chicane in the road there. Is that a problem for large trucks or trucks and trailers?
Moving vans.
What do you think?
Well, I mean, we're not going to have, we're going to have no parking on the street. Yeah, if you had cars parked on there, it'd be kind of crowded.
How much does it miss by whatever the
Our minimum is 150, and they're around, is it 80?
I think, yeah, the one is. I mean, it's set up as a driveway. I mean, a truck's going to have to, if you go in there, chances are he's not going to be staying in his lane. I mean, I think that's a given. I mean, he's going to come down,
Some of it's a function of speed also, that on a standard through residential street, you wouldn't want to have an abrupt curve in there for people traveling at 25 or 30 miles an hour, but you're not going to have that here. So I looked at, like, out in front of the Dillon's Superstore, you have Planet Avenue there, and it makes a fairly tight curve going back to the west. That is not a 150-foot radius. That curve is tighter than that, and the Planning Commission granted a waiver to that. But the 150-foot there is just to say, as a general rule on a through residential street, you don't want it to make an abrupt curve that might catch people off guard.
You'll be able to make the curve, no problem. You just have to drive pretty slow.
Okay, thanks.
Have to do it slow.
What's the plan with Overlook as far as going on south? Now it appears to be a dead end,
Yes.
and dead ends are not really attractive in a city. So what's the future
John,
for that?
If you go to slide 3 in not this application, but the next application. This is the plan that the Planning Commission saw for the whole thing, and we are talking about a street. The reason that there's no cul-de-sac at the end of Overlook Drive is that this is phase 1 right here, this line.
Missed that, I'm sorry.
And so what happened was the Planning Commission saw the master plan for the whole development. This line right here is the phase 1, phase 2 line. Phase 1 ends right here, and long term, the Overlook Drive would continue on down to this lower area and have a turnaround here. But long term, Overlook Drive would come down to this lower area, and terminate down there. So the reason that Overlook Drive just abruptly ends there is because it's not intended. The other thing is that over here, there's a emergency access roadway that comes from the Elks parking lot down over to here, and that is for fire apparatus or other emergency vehicles that if you had a blockage or something here, they'd have the alternative of going here and entering there. So that long term, it's going to be even a longer dead end, but it will have a cul-de-sac at the end, and this is viewed as a temporary dead end.
Thank you.
Any further questions of the applicant?
Can I have one more?
Absolutely.
Will you say the word chicane in it?
Gotta go look that up.
Yeah.
If we're looking at rezoning this for purposes of the development that you're looking at, is there the owners of the current unit that's there, is that a factor in this? Should they be heard as far as this is concerned?
Rex Veneer, 6 Villa Road in South Hamilton, Massachusetts. I've talked to the Martins, and they're, nobody's here, so that's a good thing. But I've talked to them, and they're on board with what we're doing here. I mean, obviously, in this area right here on the interior part, we went from 18 units down to 9 units, so they look at that as a positive.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I've talked to some other residents in that area, and they said it's an improvement.
Yeah, everybody seems to be on board with this.
But I want to make sure.
Yeah, and as far as the homeowner association that was mentioned earlier, essentially what we will do on lots 6 through 11, we'll give them their own designation because they're going to have to take the ultimate responsibility for, if it does end up being a private road, maintaining that. And so they will have another classification. Right now we have manor or estate lots A and B, and then villa lots and the carriage home lots. The carriage home will stay as it is, but now it's just 3 units, and then we'll add another classification, cottage house or something along those lines to differentiate lots 6 through 11 as also being responsible for, as far as monthly dues, really, it's only snow removal that we'd be responsible for, and then maintenance of the drive.
Okay.
And again, it is Mr. Veneer's decision that if he want to work towards making this a public street, then it's just a matter of himself and Mr. Malinowski convincing Mr. Stack that utilizing the existing paving there. That the only other aspect of this, of why we were leaning towards the private thing, is that it just on waivers of things like curb and gutter and things like that, that type of waivers available for private streets, but not for public. So there is more flexibility there. There's theoretically no such thing as a public street that doesn't have curb and gutter, but a private street could go without curb and gutter if you so found that was appropriate.
So we assume that you would want to do the private street.
That's the direction we're leaning. It seems to be the path of least resistance.
8 inches of pavement is good. That's better than, our normal is 6 inches of pavement. So
And I'd have to verify that because I know, we built it for Stout, but I can't remember exactly what we did end up doing.
Just for the purposes of everybody, 8 inches is good. If that's there, 6 wouldn't even be that bad. That's our normal
I know,
standard.
yeah.
So, and you can dowel on curb that pretty easily if it's 6-8 inches. The curb sits on that very easily, and that's what we do on most of our jobs anyway. You can tie it to the pavement, and it will stay as long as there's at least 6 inches there. So that is an option, but I don't know if you even want to go that route, but that is an option.
And if that was, you're saying we actually could attach some curbing and
that's correct.
and then you'd assuming that everything else.
It gets you that'd get you 28 foot of road. If you have a 24-foot road now, that's about what I'm measuring. It gets you 28 foot back to back, which is a foot less than our minimum, but 28 foot is very common everywhere else in the area. I guess you could attach a 2.5 foot curb, so it'd be a 29-foot road. Basically, you'd have the minimum.
So that's really what it boils down to. Is the primary difference is if it's a private street, you would have the authority to waive the requirement for curb and gutter. If it was a public street, then they would have to retrofit it with curb and gutter along the exterior boundaries of the existing pavement.
But then, once that was done, those homeowners would no longer be responsible
Right.
for the city street.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd have to give them, the variance would have to be more for the curve radii, and either parking or any other concerns for trying to get emergency vehicles in there with a smaller radius, but definitely no parking would solve that, I would think.
That was the rationale in 2003 of why the Planning Commission was wanting to beef up the private street standards, was to bring it closer to public streets so that the streets would have a longer useful life and not be a maintenance burden. And so by doing that, it probably created a little bit of a disincentive for private streets, because the difference now is much closer, but you do have the authority to approve a private street without curb and gutter, and there is no authority for a public street not to have curb and gutter if we're going to maintain it.
But again, your feelings are you just prefer private
I
streets
prefer
anyway.
private streets just because of what it's going to do to our setbacks and our,
I'm fine with me. What do we need to do to advance this? And Dean, what's our next step?
Well, on this particular item, the only thing that you are, would be voting on or recommending would be to repeal the townhome zoning and replace it with what is being described is lots, and I'm still having trouble reading numbers, John, but it's lots 1 through 4 and 12 through 15 would be the estate's lots and would be subject to the same setbacks and everything as the estate's lots over here on Stone Ridge. And then he's referring to lots 6 through 11 as cottage home lots. And so they would have slightly smaller footprints and lesser setbacks, but those would all be internal lots.
Well, I would make that motion if Alyssa can, if she's got it down, because I certainly can't remember it.
I can second that.
But you're recommending a change in land use from townhomes to single-family
Yes,
homes.
based on your recommendation.
Been moved and seconded to approve application PDD 03-3B. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None being heard, motion carries. This time we're going to excuse 2 of our members for another important meeting, and
Take care.
we still have a quorum, so we're still able to conduct business.
The second aspect of that is just the re-layout from going to a single platted lot to 15 individual lots. The first plan that was submitted that was pulled in June had 19 total lots, 18 new single-family home sites, and that was reduced to 15 total with 14 new single-family home sites. And so this is the existing layout. This is what the big block 5 looks like here. It's all one platted lot, and so what people were buying were individual townhome units, and the rest was all common area. So what the proposal is here is to go to the 14 individual lots. So maybe that's slide 6, John. You're going to probably have to blow it up a little bit. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 individual home sites, and we're basically creating a lot for this, and that will maintain its townhome zoning. So the action on this would be to consider whether to approve a replat with the with the 14 lots and the private street, and this is where, as part of your motion, you would have to document that you are approving this replat with a private street, and that private street would not have to have curb and gutter, could have a 24-foot paving width, have less right-of-way. Your other menu options are you can, through your motion and action, prohibit or limit parking on that internal street. And then the other aspect is of whether you think it's practical. Even if this was a public street, as a cul-de-sac like that, there would not be a requirement that they have a sidewalk, even on a traditional public street that's a short cul-de-sac like that. You have the discretion to require, if you see a place in here where you see a need for a public sidewalk, you could require that. You can limit parking on this street, and the things that we've identified as not complying are the curve radius, the right-of-way width, the paving width, and the lack of curb and gutter.
Dean, can you, since we can designate what can't be allowed, such as parking, in a motion, can you designate what is allowed on a private street, so down the road that's never an issue, such as emergency vehicles, city trash trucks, and school buses? Is that permissible under code to do that?
Yes, we've got a note on there, and I have to go back and look at some of my other notes, but it would be basically to say that we would, a lot of times that is designated as since it's owned only by privately and not publicly, that this whole thing would be a common area and a utility and access easement, and we could, through a note on the plat, say that as a public access easement that provides the rights of trash trucks, emergency vehicles, school buses, things of those nature. It provides them a right of access to those areas. Because the idea of making it private is not, it's to denote ownership and to denote the maintenance responsibility, but it's not designed to restrict things from being utilized from a public access standpoint.
Well,
I'd be interested in the owners.
Yeah, do you have a problem with fire trucks coming down your street if there's a fire?
No, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And school buses?
We'd probably answer that for the owner.
Yeah, I'm assuming as far as school buses, though I don't know, maybe it's different here in Salina where they go door to door, but I'm assuming that there would probably be a congregation area in between, on Overlook, where all the Stone Ridge Lane people and this road, I would assume. But,
Normally that'd be the case. The exceptions may be if you have a special needs child,
Sure.
then it's a door-to-door pickup.
Okay.
And that creates usually some question, but normal pickup, I would think, would not go down
Right.
that drive.
right.
It seems in everyone's best interest that service vehicles are allowed. It seems like a no-brainer to write that in.
Thank you. Okay, are we ready for a motion?
I think we are. Any further questions from any of the?
Yeah, and he's still got time. We're not going to put him under pressure, but we did remind them that at some point before this is recorded, that private street will have to have a name.
Well, as I always say, Householder Way, Aaron's Way. We'll settle on Aaron's Way. Overlook, Aaron just fits in there so nice.
And how many do you have named after you so far?
Well, not enough. Not enough.
So again, our menu just as relates to the street, that it is a private street. At some point, it will be a named private street, that a waiver is allowed for the curb and gutter requirement, for the paving width, for the right-of-way width, for the curve radius, that you want to restrict parking on that street, and that you want to have assured access for public service, emergency vehicles, and school buses.
I would make that a motion that we approve PO 3-4 with those particular stipulations and turning it into 14 individual residential lots.
I'll second that. Well, there you go.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve application P03-4 with the stipulations of a private drive, no curb and gutter, 24-foot reduced pavement width, reduced right-of-way, reduced curve radii, prohibited parking and access of service vehicles. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None being heard, motion carries.
Thank you.
Well, didn't think I'd get all those, did you?
I was pretty impressed with that. I mean,
I take notes.
I just, you were reading my mind is what she's doing.
Oh, yeah, on the name. You'll work
name.
with the staff. There we go.
Add that.
I will take responsibility for my proofreading gaffe on your agenda. I've go from item 5 to number 8 with other matters with nothing in between. But the this is there for Dan's benefit if you read it. But the one of the things that talked about in the comprehensive plan is to move towards a complete streets policy of when we're looking at streets, and this has more to do with major collector and even arterial streets, less so than inside a subdivision, but to just create a habit of looking at streets not just for paving width, but also looking at for things like school bus access and emergency access, bicycles, pedestrians. One of the things that we've tried to emphasize is connectivity between subdivisions. River Run's probably an example of the least connected subdivision that you can have, just because of all the topography and the river and all the things that you have. But the idea should be that you shouldn't have to exit your own subdivision to get to other places like schools or things like that. And there's some examples in there. And for Holmes Road, Mr. Stack and his staff have been doing some preliminary design work and just coming up with a concept for, if you're developing a design for Holmes Road corridor, that you look beyond just the paving width and thickness and that, and look to the rest of the right-of-way, and are you going to have sidewalks, and is one of those sidewalks going to be an extra width for hike and bike path? You can see examples of that around town. So we put in there an example of a city that has a complete streets policy, and we may be coming back with you to put something in front of you that you could make a recommendation on and vote on as far as a policy for the city of Salina. So we just wanted to put that in there for an example. We've also got some cross sections in there that show the different, with islands, without islands, how wide should the strip be between the edge of the paving and a sidewalk or path, those kind of things. So you can look at those. So those are more for your informational purposes. And then there's a section in there that talks about smart codes. And smart codes are really form-based codes where, kind of like the example that you had in item 2 today, where the emphasis is less on the use than it is on what the use looks like. So that, say, an office building that looks like that has a residential design to it might be considered compatible near a residential area, whereas something that was a square concrete block or something like that might not be. So it is moving. The way we address that now is through our plan districts and having elevations like that submitted, so you can feel comfortable as a commission what it is you're approving. But a form-based code sends the message up front that says, if you build in this corridor, at this intersection, at this gateway, this is we as a commission expect to see. We expect to see brick. We expect to see pitched roofs of a certain kind and not a flat roof. We expect to see park benches. We expect to see this. So the SMART code, or the form-based code, goes beyond just looking at should it be commercial or office or residential, and starts looking at what the form the development looks like. So these items are more in there for, not for action, but just for education and for kind of just you to read and get updated on. Those are some concepts that were talked about in the plan. And
That would perpetuate the mixed-use aspect a lot
right,
easier.
it's saying that we want to encourage commercial and residential to be close proximity, but we want the commercial to look like this. And instead of waiting for somebody to submit something and responding to it, you get out ahead of the curve and say, this is what we want to see at the corner of Marymount and Crawford, and then they should be designing to that. I think the design that was submitted was sensitive to that area and its surroundings. We just didn't feel comfortable, having gotten it this afternoon, to be able to speak to it very informedly. So,
From a design standpoint, I think they did well.
right, but what this is saying, the form-based code said, instead of reacting to it and looking at it and say we like it or we don't like it, you lay out your criteria ahead of time and say, if you're going to put commercial here, your parking needs to be in back, you can't have a driveway connection here, you need to have a pitched roof, those kind of things. It's more form-based of what the development looks like. So that's just in there to reinforce complete streets and to reinforce the form-based codes, and it's not an action item. And as far as what we have upcoming, on October 5th, we're going to do our annual landscape awards, and the Tree Advisory Board is nominating the Sunflower Bank project that was out on Schilling Road for their Golden Leaf Award, but we'll be presenting some landscape awards. And I think prior to that, for those, and we'll discuss it at the meeting too, but we will we'll have a study session that will update you on the proposed property maintenance code. It's a model code with ability to modify locally, but it fills in some of the niches between that's not covered by zoning or nuisances or health and safety codes, and it gets to appearance and maintenance and some issues regarding how properties are maintained. So it would be a step to go into having a citywide maintenance code. So we want to share with you what the concept is behind that, but we've had a lot of discussions about blight and a detrimental appearance of gateways and neighborhoods. So we'll be bringing that to you on October 5th.
Would that be before the regular meeting?
We try to do that before the meeting, but then have some discussion after the landscape awards also. But for facilitating discussion and looking at slides and things like that, we'll start that out as a study session, and then have a draft of the concept of the code in there. The Heritage Commission's already looked at it and has given us some feedback, but they're interested in terms of how it works with historical neighborhoods. But we also have gateways and corridors and things like that.
Can an action like that be arbitrary, though, to certain areas and be
Well, it would be a citywide code. How it's enforced, or we try to use a concept of neighborhood sweeps, so that there's only so many staff and so many resources. So if there's an area that has been called out by groups or commissions or individuals to say this corridor or this part of the community seems to have a number of properties that are dragging others down, then you put your target in that area, because you can't really, there's just not enough manpower and everything to hit every single neighborhood. So in terms of prioritization for enforcement, but the code itself would be citywide. But we'll present some information on that on October the 5th. And then the 19th, you'll have round 2 of the Marymount and Crawford. Round 3,
Round
sorry.
3, actually.
Sorry.
Let's see, did you have anything else on the comprehensive plan implementation?
Other than what occurred was that the City Commission considered it on first reading. The plan was sent to the County Commission for comment. They didn't have any comments other than they were supportive of the plan and liked it. And they reiterated that the urban service area that the city and county have are identical. So they recognize the boundaries we've identified as our area of interest. And they did not adopt a land use plan component outside the city limits as far as this future land use or industrial, residential, commercial, but they did say for land use changes in the county that's in the urban service area, they will use our plan and we'll carry that out. So if we have an area that shows as future industrial on the city's plan and somebody in the county wants to rezone it to residential, they're going to recommend against it because it's future industrial. So that is all positive, and the plan has been adopted by the City Commission, so it's now in place, and the adopted plan for the city. And we're going to, for final version, there's still some cleanup edits based on your recommendations that need to be put in the body of the plan, but is now officially adopted, endorsed by the county, endorsed by you, and adopted by the City Commission.
Do we have a ceremony to break a bottle of champagne over?
Only when you get your final books,
Yeah.
then we'll have the ceremony.
All right, very good.
If-
Okay, we are adjourned.
Other matters, I just want to mention something. I wanted to do it last time, and I wanted to compliment the city and engineering and planning both. As I drive down South 9th Street, I'm really pleased with what happened there. That's a nice enhancement, and I appreciate the city working on the infrastructure and trying to maintain it. Right now, we're working on Ohio and doing some mill and overlay there, and that's really improved that. And then Pacific is coming along, and that's going to be a nice enhancement. So I just want to say thanks to the staff and working diligently to keep our streets and our public service areas up.
Yeah, there's a few inconveniences on Ohio Street trying to keep streets open and do that at the same time, but there was some pain on 9th Street, but the end result is going to be very nice.
It's very nice.
The end result is worth it. Great, we're adjourned. John, could you, Mr. Householder wanted to see a picture of that.
that new building.
The new building. Could you throw one on there real quick? Is that possible?
Crawford and Marymount.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
They showed the view.